23rd, what happened was someone flagged him down, a woman, and he stopped. Do you want ice cream? Do you want nachos? She wanted his money. And she had 2 people to help him get it. They did not tell you that the people who put a gun to him were wearing ski masks. And they did not tell you that all he could see was their eyes. They wanted everything. They gave him everything. All $12. And then they shot him. And then they shot him again. And then they shot him again. And then they shot him again. I don't think it's even possible to explain or understand how Michael Keetley was able to get to that driving in the driver's seat.
Well, Mr. Grant, rephrase.
Fine. I don't think the facts will show exactly how he got in that driver's seat and was able to drive himself to safety. But somehow he did. And somehow he got help. And somehow he got taken to Tampa General Hospital. Michael Keetley arrived with shots to his leg, chest, shoulder, and hand. No one wants to be in the condition that Michael Keetley was on January 23rd. But if you are, you want to have David Halpern on call. David Halpern is the chief of plastic surgery for Tampa General Hospital. David Halpern was on call. David Halpern operated on Michael Keetley on January 24th. David Halpern has a specialty in the area of the hand. And what the prosecutors did not tell you was the extent of the injuries. David Halpern is going to come before you on March 14. And Ms. Kahn is going to ask him questions. And Ms. Kahn will help guide Dr. Halpern to educate you on what was going on with Michael Keetley, what his condition was, specifically and especially as it related to the hand. It's important for you to know that as a result of what happened to him on January 23rd of 2010, Michael Keetley was left with a pronounced limp. And the hand, they're going to use a word called comminuted fracture. Basically, that means when the bullet goes in, it just doesn't break in 1 or 2 places. It is the worst kind of injury. Sometimes you can't even put the bone back together again. And there are nerves that are attached. And Michael Keetley went through his first surgery on January 24, 2010. It would not be the last. He would have surgery again in March. He would have surgery again in June. You're going to hear a phrase called radial nerve palsy. And that simply means Michael Keetley's radial nerve, which goes from your shoulder through your arm, down to your hand, to your fingers and your thumbs, it wasn't working properly. That's what you're going to hear. And that really the only thing that could be done was to see if there would be some response over time. The radial nerve, as Dr. Halpern will tell you, is the only nerve that allows us to extend our wrist, our fingers, and our thumb. Without the radial nerve functioning properly, the person cannot extend their wrist. Without the radial nerve functioning properly, a person cannot extend their fingers. And without the radial nerve functioning properly, a person cannot extend their thumb. The question will be asked, Dr. Halpern, was the injury to Michael Keetley's hand significant? This will be the answer. It was majorly significant. It was majorly significant. So what does this mean? Dr. Halpern will tell you that what this means is that he did not have function to be able to do this. He could not. The only thing that could be done were some exercises to try to see if he would get some use, but that was over time. Here's a picture that Dr. Halpern will give you. He will say when someone goes into a room and turns on the light switch and the electricity doesn't go and the light doesn't turn on, that can be frustrating if you're entering a room. It can be very frustrating when it's your hand. The light switch will flick, but nothing would respond. Every 3 months, Michael Keetley would go for a test. A big fancy word will be used. EMG. I'm going to give you the letters because I have a hard time pronouncing it. It's a test that cannot be faked. It's a test that cannot be cheated. It cannot be gamed. Michael Keetley would have electronic stimulus put on his hand and his arm, and they would see if there was any response. The last test done on Michael Keetley, November of 2010, November 1. The results, no recovery, no improvement since the last one in June. The switch is being flicked, but electricity is not going through, and the light is not going on. And that's Michael Keetley, medically. Let's talk about what you'll hear practically. When Michael Keetley got out of the hospital in 2010, his life had changed. He could no longer live on his own. He moved in with his parents. He slept in a hospital bed. He wore Velcro shoes because he could not tie his shoes. He could not cut his meat. He could not always wipe himself. This is Michael Keetley. In order for Michael Keetley to do anything, he has to think about it. Brushing his teeth requires thought and planning. Things that are taken for granted do not happen. Now, I'm going to tell you, there'll be a couple of people probably come in, a couple of ex-girlfriends. They'll say, we didn't really notice anything. David Beckwith and Wesley Smith, you've heard about one, and you'll meet the other. Yeah, he was shooting guns. They'll say everything was fine. Directly conflicting the medical testimony. Hear me, please, and hear me clearly. Dr. Halpern has not gotten a check. Dr. Halpern is not paid.
Judge, I'm going to object this to argument.
I'll sustain. Mr. Grant, avoid argument. Just talk about the facts.
The evidence will show that Dr. Halpern was the treating doctor of Michael Keetley, not looking over anybody else's work. And he will refute them over and again. Because, see, the right hand and the left hand have to work together. He cannot do things separately and independently. That's what Dr. Halpern will tell you. In order to do this, he first must do this. And when he's got his hand open, he now must, I'll move it over here. He now must do this. That's Michael Keetley in 2010. The hand is not his only disability. All of this is going to be important for you because you're going to have to realize that medically, irrefutably, the evidence will show that his movements are slow. They are deliberate. They are awkward. They are uncoordinated. Spoiler alert, like nothing any of these people on the porch will describe. That's Michael Keetley. And furthermore, Michael Keetley had been in that neighborhood. So this is our defense. Michael Keetley is not guilty because he did not do it. He did not do it. He could not do it. He is not medically capable. So now let's talk a little bit as the calendar is turned and January becomes February, and Michael Keetley is a motivated victim. There's no question about that. I expect that we'll talk to Detective Noland, and when we asked Detective Noland, he wanted to know who did this. He was shot. He was left for dead. He called, and he called. And you know what? What they told you the evidence will be is not correct. Michael Keetley described the people who did this as black, dark complected. The detective never once considered that Hispanics can be dark complected or light complected. And when Mr. Keetley called them, he was saying the word on the street is that this was Hispanics who did this. Ruskin, Waimama, Old Sun City Center has a heavy Hispanic population. Michael Keetley never once backed off of his identification. He said, "This is what I'm hearing out there. Will you please go check it out?" And without question, you will learn that Michael Keetley wanted to have the person who did this to him caught, not killed. Crime Stoppers was involved. Rewards were offered. He put it on his truck as he drove throughout Ruskin. Do you know? Have you heard? What have you seen? That will be the evidence. He was motivated. He was interested. And when he heard something, he called. And when he called, they did nothing. Nothing. He gave them names. He gave them anything and everything he had. And you know what they said? Stop interfering, sir. Let us do our work, sir. And to some extent, as the evidence will come out, and we'll ask Detective Nolan, the reason why you do that is you don't want to pollute a victim or a witness. You saw what you saw. Let's not use word on the street. Let's not use something that could contaminate you. To a certain extent, we can understand that. They told you that Michael Keetley was angry. They did not tell you the whole truth. Yes, Michael Keetley, the evidence will show, is that guy. You want to buy a nacho? Have you heard who shot me? He was preoccupied with that. There's going to be no question. They'll put a TV story on it where he says, I want the people who did this to me to suffer like I did. He'll say that. And he'll even say in a statement with Detective Schramm, we'll talk about him, Detective Schramm, you know what he says? I went through that. I processed that. That's in the rearview mirror. You may hear from a guy named Luciano Alonso. He's got a restaurant. Michael Keetley eats there. They talked. Nobody ever called. No evidence will be brought to say he's out there threatening people. If they produce someone by the name of Armando Guerra, listen very closely, because Armando Guerra will say, if he testifies, that Michael Keetley said I was involved with the shooting. Do you know what Michael Keetley did? He held out his wrist. He held out his hand. He said it doesn't work anymore. This is what happened to me. Not once will there be a threat. Not once will there be a weapon. Because you know what the evidence is? Michael Keetley is Ruskin. Michael Keetley is Waimama. And the state's own witnesses will tell you that the people of Ruskin were fond of Michael Keetley, and Michael Keetley was fond of the people of Ruskin. You want to run a tab? Okay. You want to pay me back slowly? If at all? Okay. Over and again, Michael Keetley had involved himself in the community. That's the evidence. He was there all the time. And that is very significant to this case. Oh, and by the way, you know what one of the other emotions he expressed was? I thought I was going to die, but I feel like God gave me a second chance.
Objection, Judge.
Approve.